Now it's recording. So welcome, Heidi, the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Futurice. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ira. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Heidi, and I'm from Futurice. Working full-time with topics nowadays, and I have a HR background, so I have worked with learning and development, employer branding, recruitment in different kinds of companies and in a few different countries throughout my career. And in the last 10 or so years, I've been in the tech consulting sector. And since last summer, I have been working on, I've been able to focus solely on these diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. And I discovered that it's actually my dream job. So I'm very happy to be able to spend full time this role. And yeah, I've lived in a few countries in Europe. I studied in the UK and worked a couple of years in the Netherlands. I have two kids, 7 and 9-year-old boys. So unfortunately, MiB wasn't around when I was on my maternity leaves. But luckily, I have some friends who have been there, actually some of the founding members. And then when I've been working, I've been, for example, doing mentoring for one of the MiB mentoring programs. And I like being here in this, especially in the MiB International Network. I'm part of an international family myself. My husband is Australian, and so we are raising our kids to be global citizens. So it kind of feels like a cozy and my kind of an environment. But yeah, I'll share with you some things that we have done at Futurice on our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. And I'll start by sharing my screen. Now, are you able to see my screen? Yes, excellent.
Yes.
So a few words about Futurice. So we are a tech consulting company, about 600 plus people, been around for 20 years. We are in 4 countries in Europe, on 8 different offices, and we reoperate as a one company. And we also have some daughter companies that we are growing as part of our business. And we do B2B business, so we help other organizations in their digitalization journey. And you can see a few already here, a few like our diversity aspects. So we have 45 nationalities who are working with us. Here in Helsinki, I think it's 32. About a quarter of our people here in Helsinki are international, and 32% of the company are women or other diverse genders. We have defined what we mean by diversity and inclusion. So for us, the diversity, when we are talking about it, we refer to the kind of like the people in terms of who are in our field of impact. And when we talk about our field of impact, we mean our employees, our clients, their clients, our stakeholders. So all sorts of different groups around us. And inclusion for us means that it's like a practice for everybody to be able to be themselves, be respected, to be able to contribute as fully themselves. And also we want to kind of make a point that we believe that diversity is intersectional. So you cannot be defined by just one attribute, but you most likely have many attributes in you, and you are kind of like a combination of many things. So for us, it's important that we have this intersectional diversity, also diversity of thought that quite often is a product of having a different kind of diversity, people from different diverse backgrounds, and representation. And here's a photo that was taken about 2.5 years ago. And this is from the very beginning of our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. So for us, this journey started from a small group of people. They were just regular employees software developers, designers, but they happen to be really passionate about this topic. And they got together and decided that we should do something about it as a company. And they decided that we should get together and have a workshop and learn a bit more about this. And this picture is from that workshop. And what they did in a really smart way was that they made sure that they invited to that workshop, first of all, people from our different offices, people who are part of different employee groups. So we call them competencies. So there were designers, there were developers, there were people who are more in the management consulting side. And then they handpicked their people in certain roles. So in this picture, there's, for example, our head of HR, there's our CEO, there's our marketing director. And at that time, I was responsible for employer branding. So I was invited for this workshop because I was working on that field. And we spent 2 days on this topic. We had external consultants who were really experts on these matters. And in this workshop, this was no lecture. This was like really hands-on or bodies on. Here, I think you had to show with your body how you feel about the current state of how we should approach D&I at Futurice. I think something like that was the topic here. And we did a lot of personal exercises where we really tried to dig deep into our own experiences and understand our own kind of position and our own privileges, for example. So it was, I think for many people, it was quite a powerful experience, this workshop. And this planted in a very nice way some seeds. So after this workshop, we formed something called Equity Workforce. So it was a team of people. It was many of them were those original people who had been part of getting this thing started. But it was like a group of people who did this kind of like as a side thing on top of their normal jobs, kind of getting together every now and then and thinking like, how can we be taking this diversity and inclusion topics forward? And this is the point when I got involved in this group. And we kind of started doing different things. I think here it's like, it looks like we had a very organized, like, 5 streams. That's not how it went. We basically just figured out like, okay, what do we do? One of the first things we did, we created a code of conduct. Then we thought that our like people leaders, they seem to need some support on this. So we started to figure out like some inclusive leadership trainings for them. So it wasn't quite this organized how it looks here. I think one very good thing what we did was we started having regular conversations with our leadership, and especially the CEO and the head of HR. So we just kind of like, not very formal, but just on the side, like talking to them regularly about this topic and kind of helping them to understand it and to get deeper into it and really kind of see the like benefits of it, like why as an organization this is important to us. And I can say at this point that really has paid off. So here are some of the practical things we did. So all these things were done as a kind of a so-called extra thing on top of your normal working thing. We got the external help for doing a diversity and inclusion audit, and that was a really powerful thing to do. Basically, it was a long survey that was sent to everybody in the organization to ask about their experience. And then in connection to the survey, there was interviews. So these external consultants who conducted the audit, they invited people to take part in interviews where they kind of like were able to share more about their experience. And this was done completely anonymously. So to this date, I don't know who were interviewed, or like we don't have access to the raw data of the survey. But as a result, we got like a really long 70-80 page analysis of the results. And this really helped in knowing kind of like where like what parts of the organizations are we really needing to focus on. So the point of the survey was not to find out what does the majority think of these things. It was to kind of really pinpoint like, okay, so these kind of minority groups are struggling with that kind of issues. So really like, where are we broken and what do we need to fix? And this has really helped us in kind of like when we have then been going further in this topic and defining some goals and strategies. Some other things that I could lift out from this, what happened at that point, I've already mentioned, for example, the trainings we did. So anybody who's in any kind of people leader role, as well as anybody in our HR practice or anybody in our leadership went through this inclusive leadership training. We started having a session in our onboarding. So all the new starters really dug deep into the topic. And we were basically taking it forward on multiple different streams, but at the same time, it was still done as like an extra thing. And I think one thing that we did was that we really started to focus on the inclusion. Like that was our main thing there. Like we started building on top of what we already had as an organization. So we started strengthening the things that we were doing well as fixing those things where we saw that there's problems. And so that's how it went on for quite a while. And then last summer, we were doing a company-wide strategy renewal. So really renewing the whole company strategy. And at that point, all this work had basically, instead of being that kind of, like a really sidelines, like marginal discussion, it had become quite a mainstream topic already. And therefore, it was quite natural that this became one cornerstone of our business strategy. So for us, we really believe that this is one of the success factors that will make us successful in the future. So now it wasn't anymore something that a group of people were kind of like doing, but it was really like we made a statement saying that, okay, like we want to be successful in the future. This is one of the ways that we believe that we can be such. We created a DEI point of view. We set our ambition, and also we set ourselves some measurable goals. And we did this together with the whole organization, and especially with leadership. And then we took all this to the Futurice board and discussed them through with them and agreed that they are the ones who will hold us accountable for making progress towards these goals that we have set to ourselves. So this is kind of like, it went from really like a bottom up for quite a while with many different actions until it was mature enough that we were able to bring it also top down. And now we are kind of like there where we are taking it to both directions. Here you see how we have defined our ambition. So we want to be a company that celebrates the diversity and commits to building an inclusive international culture and have equitable opportunities and sense of belonging to everyone. That's what we want to be. And then our goals are here, like how do we want to measure that? So we have 3 goals, and all these 3 are closely linked to each other, and they are such that when you do something to progress one goal, you're actually helping the 2 others. So we want to be a completely inclusive workplace. Currently, we see that there's gaps between how different people experience inclusion, and we want to close those gaps. We want to be first choice for tech women. So when we were creating this strategy and the goals, we had to make a choice what diversity dimensions we are focusing on. So up until that point, we had been kind of like focusing on everything. But when this became like a top-down business priority, that's when we realized that in order to really make big developments, we do need to make some choices. So we chose our dimensions that we are focusing on are gender and multiculturalism. And in terms of gender, we looked at the organization. So of course, we are a tech company, and that's not a very gender balanced sector at all. So that's part of why we felt that this is really a must do for us. But we looked at our different competencies, so people who are working in different kind of roles. And we saw that in our design competence, that's quite 50-50, the gender balance, as well as our managing consulting competence. But in our tech competence, that's where we really saw that it's not in balance. So here is where we wanted to focus our goal. So we want to increase the amount of women and diverse genders in our tech competence, so that it's a third of that competence. And in addition, we want to have it such that it's across all the different career levels. That means the seniority in the company, so that in all career levels, it's 1/3 are women. And finally, we want that our leadership mirrors the organization that they are leading. So our global leadership team and our country level leadership teams, the composition of those teams should really look like percentage-wise the same as the organization that they are leading, from the gender angle and from the multiculturalism angle. And these are the 3 goals that are kind of that we are committed to, and that they are really directing our operations in terms of DE&I now. So now you could say that it's still we have the equity workforce exists. So it's really the kind of the bottom-up grassroots operations. We have the top-down, which is it's on the leadership agenda, it's on the board agenda. They are really interested, and they actually are doing things to take it forward. And now we also have these local teams that are driving the local goals to make difference in those. And now we have identified different kind of streams to really get us closer to the goals. And here are some of the practical actions that we are right now doing. So inclusion is a big topic. Some of them are related to really like core HR processes, such as career progression or salary raises. Just yesterday, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine who's driving this salary process, and we were kind of investigating the recent raises with the D&I lens and checking that how do they look like from that angle. I'm happy to say they look good. We have identified that language is one source of what people feel as a hindrance for the inclusion. And for us as a company, English has been the language for the last close to 15 years, I think, when we hired our first international person. But because we work in a client business, so there are still some clients where they require the local language. So here in Finland, they require Finnish language, and this is something we are working to change. We are still continuing the sparring with the CEO, with the country managing directors. We have an open line with the CEO all the time, so like we can have very honest discussions with him about like how can we progress this topic. And also we have regular meetings with the board to see how we are progressing and get also advice from them on what to do. We are also now, DEI is not anymore a separate project, but it's really kind of infiltrating in everything we do, like all the operations that we have, all the parts of the organization that we have. So it's kind of like, it's a lens that we look things through. So, one of the key lenses is the business and the client work. And for example, a lot of my time has gone for that up until in this year. And there we have taken as part of our sales materials, we are running actually our own webinar series, Inclusive Edge, which is directed to our clients, where we involve our clients to discuss these topics and really to kind of like discover what's the business value of inclusivity. We are just about to launch an inclusivity canvas, which is part of service design processes that can be used in any organization. We will share this externally as well. And we have, from the beginning, we have taken this, consciously taken this approach that we want to share our journey with the outside world, and we want to share kind of what we have learned, so that maybe others will not have to repeat the same mistakes. And also we believe that by talking about these things, then first of all, you make this topic more visible, and you can hopefully also, with your example, encourage some others to do, because we really believe that this is not about just us, it's about the society at large. Like it's like we are here to make a larger systemic change than just changing our own company. Yeah, and then we have done a lot of different kind of trainings since the initial ones, and now we are just defining how we are about to launch our affinity groups, and also encouraging this kind of allyship thinking. And we have some support for teams. We have piloted a program for creating discussions around allyship, and this is something we are currently continuing as well. And then this is Jessica. She's 18 years old, and last October she was our CEO for 1 day. This was part of a one project related to DEI called Girls Takeover that we did together with Plan International, and we used this day to really again bring the topic of girls and technology and women in leadership really to the frame. And so Jessica really led the organization for 1 day, but also what we did was we incorporated the whole organization into this in a way that we organized this kind of a competition where people could form teams and spend 1 day figuring out solutions for the kind of problems that girls and women face in technology, either with using it or creating it today. And then the winning proposal, who Jessica and our regular CEO team were choosing the winning proposal out of the team's results. Then we took that on and have been developing that further, and it's actually that inclusivity canvas that I just mentioned to you. So it will be shared for public use soon. And then this was one of the very first things we started with. We actually used to share this list in our onboarding with the new people. And I wanted to finish with this slide to kind of give just like small pointers on how we have been kind of creating this kind of inclusive culture, starting from one individual. Like what is it that really one individual can do? And because a lot of it is about your attitude and how you treat each other and your behaviors on top of those organizational things. But the way we wanted to kind of introduce this topic to people was to really being curious about people, seeing the human behind the role, and kind of celebrating the fact that each one of us are a unique human being with our differences. And we are actually much more rich as an organization when we have all the different humans here with the different characteristics and different backgrounds and different worldviews. So the end result is much more than 2 + 2. It's not 4 in this case, but it's much more. So we don't want to have the same kind of people who fit some kind of mold. We want that there's all these different flowers that are part of the company, and we want to celebrate that. And then another aspect that we wanted to highlight with this is the empathy, and really seeking to understand the person and always assuming good intentions, especially when the situations might be more tense. And then we highlighted one very practical thing that for us as an international organization, where, as I mentioned, we have over 40 different nationalities. So we always tend to use, and we want to use language that everybody understands. And I think this, especially when we were more working in the office, this was a very practical hint that if somebody walks into the room and you're having a conversation with someone else, then that conversation should automatically switch to a language that person who walks into the room can understand, so that they can participate if they choose to, so that the people in the conversation don't make that choice for that third person. But yeah, that's my short view into the what we did in so far in our DE&I journey, and the journey has just begun, and it's still like we are in the quite early stages of it, but we have done already some things, and we really are committed to making a lot of progress and getting there. I don't know if there's ever an end, but I think we definitely want to become better at what we do and learn to be better every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heidi. This is so interesting. And for me, I think you've done so much. You said that you were doing this for 2 years now, or?
Yeah, so the first team, the first discussion started just under 3 years ago, and the equity workforce has been like about 2.5 years ago. And then like I have been working full time since last summer.
Yes, but I still think you are one of the pioneers, especially here in Finland. Of course, different companies approach DEI in different ways, but this was really inspiring. If you have any questions, we have time for 1 or 2 questions, so you can write it down to the chat. For me, it was interesting to hear that this started in Futurice as a grassroots movement. So what would you say to employees that want to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organizations and probably don't have as mature company culture as you do? So what would be like concrete examples on how to get things going and get started?
I think it's first of all like start having those conversations, and probably like hopefully through those conversations find others who also think in this way. And then if you really start to kind of if you want to kind of make a change, or like make a give good ground to somebody else, like why should we as a company do this, then I have found that different reasoning works for different people. So at least 3 kind of reasons I can think of. One is that it's the right thing to do, kind of the ethical, like we really should do this. This is like we want to be a good company, we want to be a good corporate citizen. So that's one thing. Then I think another one is like the numbers, like the business numbers. Like I think the talent market is a very lucrative one to use here, as long as you tie to the inclusivity, as long as there's the understanding that you can't just go for the diversity and forget about the inclusivity, because that will backfire in a bad way. And then the third one is there's a lot of research in the numbers also in terms of that the more diverse teams create better financial performance, they are more creative. You can find a lot of research on this. So kind of you can also give that kind of business angle to it. But it depends a bit on like who you talk to, and you may not know going into the conversation what works for them. But I think it's good to keep the different kind of angles in your mind, and then like seeing like what seems to have traction, and then go with that. And I think for different people, it's the different things.
Good answer. Do you have any other questions from the audience? There's nothing on the chat.
But there is a nice comment from Jennifer, who writes that it's such an inspiring story on an interesting topic. Thank you, Heidi. Thumbs up to Futurice efforts in making the world a better place. It's always great.
Oh, thank you. That's really sweet.
And of course, if there will be more questions later on, please type them into the chat. We'll tackle them a bit later.
Yes. By the way, I'm really happy to connect in LinkedIn or wherever, so feel free to add me.
Yeah, there are many connections on chat, so please feel free to put your LinkedIn profile if you want. Okay, thank you, Heidi. And the next presentation will be from Mäkinen, and she's the managing consultant from the Clear company. Also the head of Clear Assured and the director of diversity and inclusion at Women in Tech. Welcome, Anna, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do have a couple of hats on. So just a little bit about my background, very, very similar to Heidi, and actually 10 out of 10 in terms of how our thoughts are aligned. So I hope that I can bring some more value from a consultant perspective to this end of this webinar. So my background is also very much in talent acquisition, talent management, HR, or people operations. Also very international background. I am currently based in London. I've been here for something like 6 years. Before that, I was in Spain and Sweden, and I am from Turku originally. Yeah, first of all, I was trying to kind of come up with very specific things that you can kind of start your journey. And like Heidi was saying, all of this is about journey. Everything you do within DE&I is going to transform your organization, ideally. And obviously culture is such a big aspect to it. And I really loved hearing also the intersectional lens, because quite often when we look at D&I, it starts with that sort of gender lens, which, yes, of course, we need to look at, and we need to set our focus on certain things. And for me, as a Women in Tech ambassador, that has always been my kind of personal why, but then looking at many other things. So I tried to come up with some practical tips for you as well, but very much aligned to this idea that D&I is, again, cultural transformation. It's a journey. So you need to look at it from, this is actually about changing mindsets and changing attitudes. So it actually starts with all of us here, and everybody's attitude towards D&I matter a lot. So let me just try to share my screen. And we go. Then if I can just get that, where can I get it? Things. So let's see. Sorry, because the thing is there, so I can't get. How can I move this? Okay, here we go. You should be able to see it now. Yes, cool.
Yes, we can see it.
Amazing. Yeah, so let's just get started. I did want to give just kind of a very quick sort of introduction what the Clear company does, because obviously I'm talking as an external consultant. This is what we do on a daily basis. So everything basically that Heidi was saying in terms of kind of starting with the audit and really understanding where are we right now. Is it that we actually need to look at the barriers within our inclusive hiring? Is it actually that we need to start looking at actually building the business case? And this is where I had to start with Women in Tech, when we started to look at very intersectional lens, and other than, yes, we are women in tech, but we are so much more than that. So exactly understanding the kind of business why, the organizational why for sustainable change. Absolutely, we need to look at our leadership. What are the inclusive behaviors there, but also aligning the strategy, the diversity strategy, to our further business goals. So obviously, this is not about just finding certain talent, but actually how do we assess the talent, and how do we retain that talent, and how do we actually create and maintain that sense of belonging. So then it might be that you do need to look at this kind of audit or look at your processes or procedures to understand where we actually are right now. Or maybe it's more about that continuous development. Maybe with something like coaching, you start to understand how do we change these behavior models. So this is something that I used very similarly when I was internal HR, and I was starting with this kind of awareness session. What is actually D&I? How do we do it in a way that it's actually authentic? And of course, I had my kind of recruiter hat on, but also the employer branding, the company reputation, all of those things that are the long-term goals. So let me just hide that one so I can see. So this is just, again, we absolutely believe that success is driven by removing those barriers to inclusion and creating those diverse workplaces. And it's absolutely by doing this, you will allow the unseen talent to shine. So again, there will be that kind of action-focused approach. It's all good to have certain policies in place. It's all good to challenge the mindset, but it has to be supported long-term to have that crucial agenda that we actually want to become a socially responsible business. So what we've done, and obviously each of you start to think about it by, first of all, we need to start challenging those conventional thinking and behaviors. That's the first step. We need to create this kind of safe environment where it's actually okay and encouraged to ask those important questions and having those honest and open conversations. Definitely the intersectionality, definitely long-term thinking. We need to prepare already now, given everything that has happened in the last couple of years, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, all of these things are on everybody's agenda, whether we want it or not. And we have to be prepared to have those kind of quite difficult, uncomfortable conversations as well. The future is pan-diverse, and we have to be on this train to be able to sustain our businesses. And also it is, of course, you need to take these practical kind of actions and led by those kind of practical realities, while still making sure that you have policies and procedures in place that actually reflect your business goals and your specific needs of your workplace. So I loved what Heidi was saying, engaging everybody in the organization. We have to give voice to those who have lived experiences at all levels in an organization. And it gets more and more interesting when you start to look at things like neurodiversity, disability, maybe trans and non-binary inclusion. And then you look at all the international locations and you start to see the complexity of this work. But that's the way that you need to have also these objectives, well-presented findings, whether it's from data, and I'm not only talking about percentages of certain demographics, but also what insights are we drawing from that data? Because then we have these well-presented findings, especially for those people whose why is the business and the numbers, because that's how you actually ensure that support is there for change at all levels. And of course, there's different kind of trainings and learnings, and that's a great kind of way to start. But really, you need to make that a journey that is authentic and it's agile, it's stretching as the society and the world changes as well. So I wanted to kind of actually this kind of nicely builds on Heidi's lot now. So when I talk about inclusive leadership, I'm talking about all of us, regardless of our titles, we are leaders to some extent, and we are leaders of this agenda. Because this kind of ties again very closely to the behavior models. It's absolutely not the same to have an inclusive leadership if you have a diverse leadership team. So you need to kind of distinguish those two things. And all leaders, regardless what their background is, what their kind of seniority or their title is, they should be the ones absolutely to kind of champion that behavioral for D&I, because that's where actually the culture shift starts to happen. So I agree that you need to start somewhere and take kind of both ways, top down, bottom up approach. And here's some things to start thinking about. So what is actually the role of a leader in creating an inclusive culture? And I, again, loved what Heidi was saying about the empathy, because the role of emotional intelligence is just growing so much in inclusive leadership, but generally, especially from, working in tech, that is one thing that the robots and the AI and the machine learnings can't do yet. That is one of our things that we need to really, as humans, kind of maintain and develop. But then you might ask, why is inclusive leadership important? And again, we are all in this. We all need to be very self-aware of our own actions, and there must be this link between inclusion and the organizational success. I think we're past the point of the business case. Is diversity and inclusion important for businesses and workplaces and society? We know that it is, and it's essential for any kind of sustainable growth. Also, we know the impact of non-inclusive cultures. I think we're past that point as well, especially after Heidi's good talk. And it's so important to have some kind of measures for change. What does success actually look like for us, and how does it align to the wider business goals? And again, all of us, we have certain kind of inclusive leadership shadow, and it's so important to understand your own personal biases. We are humans, and it is not about removing unconscious biases or conscious biases. It's rather taking a step back and being aware and acknowledge that, okay, this is what I started thinking. What do I do next? And are these actually impacting the decision making? But it's also very important to have your personal why, because that kind of then starts to land the authenticity of the change. So do take time to really kind of be aware of your own biases and your personal whys. And then you can start to hold that mirror internally within your organization, or perhaps even benchmarking within sector. So where are we today? What are the barriers? What are the gaps? And how do we develop that inclusive culture for us? So focus on that action, focus on having that commitment organizationally, and agree together those measures for change. And if there's anything else, if you don't take anything out of this presentation, do take the fact that you are responsible for what you will do next. We all can do something. So here are some of the behaviors, and I've left a couple of dots there so that you can also think what it means for you. And maybe if we have time, we can come back to this. But what does a successful inclusive leader, how do they behave? So they are the ones who actually obviously understand the benefits of D&I and sees that as that is the thing that inspires creativity. There is the thing that creates and increases our innovation, and that's sharing of ideas. Of course, the more innovative, creative we are, it also maximizes our performance, it improves our retention, and it lowers the cost of hire. We don't have this kind of group think anymore, so it absolutely reduces that opportunity as well. But a successful inclusive leader also sets those aims and objectives for the diverse teams to really work and target inclusivity. And that's when we created this safe environment where it's okay and it's business as usual to explore different hopes and fears. And if we just look at the past year or two, how much we've actually changed our kind of the norm, and how, what does a leader look like? How does a leader act like? Because there wasn't any more norm. We were welcome to everybody's home. There was huge things about just well-being in general. And that's, for me, because this has been my passion for so long, it's something positive out of this horrible situation worldwide, that we actually got it on everybody's agenda and started thinking, how do we actually want to behave? So how do you do this in more concretely? And this is for all of us to do again. Challenge those inappropriate behaviors. When you see injustice, when you see inequality, when you see harassment, sexism, racism, whatever it is, stand up against it. Speak up, be that confident person that helps others, because again, this is much wider than the specific workplace. This is about societal change as well. Celebrating diversity. It is so important, and it's stay curious. This is also about the kind of upskilling and the future of work, to stay curious and wanting to make a difference. That's why it's very important to have that personal why, because this work is not easy. There's going to be some hiccups and some difficult conversation. But once you start to really welcome that healthy debate, you start to actually listen and you start to actually encourage those unique viewpoints, We don't need to look the same, act the same, look the same, but we can really appreciate those kind of different differences and the different ways of thinking and doing things. And when we continuously learn, we actively listen, and we also give space for others. And this is, practical thing is the employee resource groups, these kind of networks that you have this safe space to share these lived experiences. And just very simple, for example, what we did in previous job, does it always have to be that one person to run a meeting, to have that kind of presentation mode? It could be someone else, just as a very, very practical little example. But all of us here, all of us in your organizations can be those role models. Something that in all of the organizations in the past 5 years I've worked, mentoring has been so important. And I'm also personally a very big fan of coaching, because that's also a way of kind of changing those unconscious biases or behavior models, and really also for the leaders, for the seniors, to have that kind of buy-in and that attitude for change. And again, mentoring can be very different. It can be reverse mentoring, formal mentoring, informal mentoring, definitely many ways to do it. And yes, it's important to have your own why, but also holding others accountable. It is very important. And again, the emotional intelligence and the empathy, showing your own humanity and vulnerability. Nobody's perfect. No leader has done their job, 100 out of 10 out of 10. It's okay, and it's beautiful to see that, when we actually look at these top global leaders and they're showing their vulnerability and what they want to learn, it does make a difference. And again, this links very closely to what Heidi was talking about, and this is for all of you, not only in terms of identifying your maturity as an individual, but for your organizations, and maybe even your networks. How do we see DEI? How are our leaders involved with the work? So if it starts with this kind of unawareness, and we're still kind of thinking, okay, well, what's the point of diversity and inclusion? Is there any benefits? What are the benefits? That means that the organization is, there's not a true desire to address DEI. There's probably no policies in place, and the leadership is just maintaining the status quo for like. They're quite uninterested in DEI. You then move into this kind of, okay, well, it's an ethical thing, it's a compliant thing. We know that DEI has to be done, so that's kind of the reason why we do it. We look at kind of the legislative requirements. Perhaps we collect some basic data, and maybe we develop some baseline policies. But the issue here is that leadership is not owning the DEI responsibility and the actions. And perhaps the DEI is kind of seen as a separate department or entity or project, and it sits within selected few, for example, someone from HR or someone from recruitment teams. And then we start to get into the strategic way where we understand that DEI is actually important to our success. It's very much a strategic objective for the organization. We can develop KPIs. We're actually tracking our achievements. And our leaders very much own and communicate confidently the DEI strategy and the business benefits throughout. We can then move into this kind of integration. So actually DEI becomes part of everything we do. It's no more this kind of complex, different kind of department. It's just reflecting and reinforcing everything that we do from a policies, practices perspective. And here is where the organization really actively supports underrepresented groups. And of course, leaders right now in this case have more in-depth DEI knowledge, and it's actually integrated into all of the activities. And then we get to the leader level where we're actually disrupting, and we're actually talking about DEI best practice and innovation. And this is then very much about this whole kind of ideology, This is demonstrating that leading corporate citizenship in this area. And this is where we're starting to get to the innovation, to the encouraging and challenging the status quo. And of course, here it's business as normal, business as usual for leaders to challenge their own thinking and the thinking of others. So I hope that that gave a little bit of kind of also for maybe you that don't work within DE&I and would like to do something in the organization to start thinking, okay, how do I start the narrative? Because all of us can start this work pretty much. So I wanted to give just a little bit about Clear Assured, because that is one tool where you can actually start to set those goals. You can actually start to measure success, and you can start to think, how do I deliver, how do I monitor, and how do I report my progress against, again, the wider business goals. Obviously, I am head of Clear Assured, so if you have any specific questions, then don't hesitate to come to me. But I look after the whole, again, full life cycle of employment, and I use this framework for women in tech, our internal and external D&I work as well. So we look at policies and procedures, again, having that kind of fundamental kind of foundations in place for us to get to more inclusion. And then, of course, how do we actually find that talent? What are the barriers there? What do we need to do? Is it job descriptions, the comms, employer branding, our values, all these kind of things? But then again, we might find this great diverse talent, but how do we then also do our assessment process inclusively? And how do we then, once we've hired this person, how do we actually retain that talent and again create the kind of the beauty of this all, the sense of belonging? And whether it's Clear Assured or whether it's any other tool or any other kind of actions that you want to take on your journey, make sure of these things. So it is definitely based on continuous professional development. Any changes in legislation, any changes in society, like we've seen now, we've just challenged the kind of what is norm. You constantly have to be curious about this. So make sure that you have someone or a resource hub or some sort of guidance that you need to progress from a pan-diversity, from an intersectional lens. Also make sure that you have this kind of as-you-go approach, because it's one thing to have a D&I strategy and then, you know, in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months, 18 months, you start to do something, but make sure that it's continuously, you know, proactive journey. And do involve stakeholders again across the organization from the beginning. Set your focus for sure. Make sure that it's somehow aligned to the further, again, for example, talent acquisition strategies, your hiring kind of talent management strategies, but move from activity to activity. And again, once you use the kind of different resources, if you involve the stakeholders to use this kind of guidance on a day-to-day basis, it speeds also the progress to more maturity within D&I. So here's just a couple of key principles in summary about Clear Assured. And again, this links to what you should do anyway, regardless using a Clear Assured or any other tool. Set the direction and focus, lead activity. It's all nice to speak about this and have that awareness, but it has to be action-led. It's good to leave some kind of audit trail of activity because, well, first of all, these questions will be asked by your candidates, by different organizations, your customers, to have that kind of central place where you can go to see, okay, these are the things we've actually done. These are the kind of return on investment, the bigger business benefits, have that kind of audit trail. Make sure that you're benchmarking in a very transparent and based on evidence. Again, measure your journey continuously. And again, if you're interested in hearing more about what we do, then I can talk about those regular check-ins that we do with our customers, with our account management. So this is how the system looks like, and I'm just gonna give a couple of very kind of practical things how I started. looking at the whole journey and how obviously then the system has guided me through and our clients. But something like training your third-party recruiters, it's just one example within finding talent. You need to make sure that you are actually building the capability of your recruiters, whether they're internal, whether they're your third-party recruiters, because they are, as we know, they are very often the first contact for an applicant for your organization. So the representation is pretty important. And you want to know and make sure that they also promote the inclusion in the same way that you do within your kind of strategic decisions. And that's why it's so important when there's obviously a number of different kind of trainings and then workshopping or e-learning, those kind of things, that you can make sure that your recruiters improve their understanding and they are up to date with certain processes, because that's the way that they can then reach your organization goals. And this could, cover things like assessment process, so including inclusive shortlisting, and of course the importance of job descriptions and the job design, the use of language and tone, reasonable adjustments or workplace accommodations, absolute must these days. Also think about your routes to market, your use of social media. Make sure that there is authentic training on legislations. They are aware of types of discrimination. And again, they know also your organization's approach to D&I in those strategic aims. And of course, it's also good for them to understand what is the business case and understanding that. But not only recruiters, so obviously then it's all good if your recruiters are very, very aware, but then they go to final interview and there's some inappropriate behaviors, then it's kind of like, it's no good. So make sure that you improve capability in inclusive recruitment throughout. Something else, also job analysis frameworks. So that's something that I focused a lot through Women in Tech, and that's the whole piece of job design as well. And of course, it then relates to the further examples. This is how the system works. So it's very easy. You literally just upload the evidence of documented activity directly here. And then it creates that kind of audit trail that, okay, these are the things that we have in progress. These are the things we've actually submitted for the review. And this is where we are in terms of our benchmarking. Again, some other things to consider. So when you start to look at things like, well-being, for example, something like signing the mindful employer charter, time to change. There's many things to consider, but definitely that sort of initiative to promote mental health and well-being. Obviously, this is one of the things, given the current situation, that has gotten to everybody's agenda more and more. And we know, I'm sure all of us here know, that people who have mental health issues, they may have experienced discrimination in recruitment and selection procedures. And of course, that then may discourage them for further. So give that appropriate support. Of course, the vast majority of people that actually have experienced mental ill health, they continue to work successfully, as do many with ongoing issues. So it might just be a matter of promotion and having those right things in place, like reasonable adjustments. And of course, again, it's about mindsets and attitudes. So show that positive and enabling attitude to the employees and your job applicants with mental health issues. And of course, ensure that all of your staff are involved and briefed on mental health issues, and they know the equality laws and things like that. And then, of course, LGBTQ+. So that's of course something you do have to keep in mind as well. One kind of example could be joining Stonewall's Diversity Champions programs. If you are a global company, obviously create global briefings for your colleagues. Make sure that you adapt your D&I policy to suit that global audience, and start to have those conversations. Just a couple of more slides. I wanted to add a couple of case studies from our customers. So, for example, Pech Group, global recruitment firm, they've been part of this journey with us for some time, and it's amazing to see how they place that inclusion at the core of their organization. This kind of leads to the point I was saying about accessibility, because what happened specifically with them, 2019, the CEO of Pech Group became a wheelchair user, and it was a very natural step then to look at a full accessibility review. So the understanding of the kind of requirements, understanding what sort of review of our, for example, main buildings have to be done, and have that kind of in-depth user-focused analysis and audits of what's actually going on, and what is the perspective of a disabled visitor, for example. And of course, take those recommendations into account. What are the risks to the disabled user? What is actually the impact of not making the change? And of course, the reputational impact for your organization, and much more. But it's so important to have that good practice from the get-go. And of course, as Sherry here, the D&I director, commented, for them, the accessibility is now business as usual, just as it should be. That demonstrates the depth, that demonstrates that they are determined to embrace all aspects of inclusion, and building accessibility, of course, is a key part of this. And then finally, this is another HS2. Humbly, they are doing one of the biggest European infrastructure projects in Europe at the moment. And for them, it was really about having that top and middle management held accountable in their efforts towards ED&I. And that's the main thing, that now the HR directors are also very, very involved in sort of the progression. Where are we? How are we using the kind of content and training? How is it landing and changing that narrative? And that's where again, they refer to transformation program, and it's seen in every single way in their organization, in their supply chain, in their customer service, in their inclusion at these construction engineering sites. So that is a way to bring EDI to life. That's my slide. And of course, feel free to contact me, connect me in LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Anna. We have one question here on chat that was really good. Sari is asking what metrics could be used if you are in the beginning of this journey, and what goals could be set to leaders to make them accountable instead of being something that HR does?
Again, I get asked this many times, and there's not one answer, because this is the whole kind of change, any change management process, right? But if you just want a couple of things, look at the data, hold the mirror, where are we right now? And then again, not just the percentages, but actually, where are we? What actual concrete insights can we draw from this data? It's pretty self-explanatory when you look at your organization and you realize that we don't have any Black employees, we don't have any women in leadership. So look at the data that is there already. And then, things like employee engagement surveys or these kind of regular check-ins to see this kind of pulse surveys of how are we actually feeling right now. And that should then start to create that business benefit. Again, if you, with those insights, you want to go to the leaders, this is the issue. We will not be successful if it continue to be like this.
Thank you so much. Are there any more questions?
I think that there was one question earlier. It was mostly for Heidi, but perhaps Anna could also answer to it. Sari was also asking any book recommendations on the topic of diversity and inclusion. We named 2 books here. Heidi answered. Just a second. maybe Heidi can tell actually about the book.
It's
Yes.
The Invisible Women. I think quite many people had read it.
Yes, but perhaps Anna could also recommend, or maybe some other resources, not necessarily a book, if something comes to mind. Yeah. Then, yes, there was a question about the metrics, and then metrics for beginners. And then how often do you need to measure success?
That's a good question I can take. I mean, measure of success, of course, it's not just, you know, one thing fits all, but as often as possible. I mean, at the earlier company where I worked, we had a weekly kind of pulse survey, very quick, very kind of 5 minutes automatically via Slack. Where are we right now? And then you start to see those kind of like any changes, any trends going on, you know, things like that. But I guess from a DE&I matrix thing, I would definitely stay within quarterly measurement at least. If you do it annually, that's too slow in my opinion. Yeah.
Yes, definitely weekly sounds very advanced for most of the organizations. Quarterly, it's more doable.
Yeah, we have that, like it's a people pulse. It measures 15-20 different things, out of which diversity and inclusion is one thing. And so in my work, I focus on that measurement, and specifically the inclusion measurement. And it does give actually really good, and our goals are tied to that inclusion measurement as well, because inclusivity is like super hard to measure. So that was a concrete way, and that's something that we, for example, use as a basis for discussions with the leadership to kind of see how it's going. So it does help a lot.
Maybe Heidi, since Anna had a chance to talk about examples, maybe Heidi, you could talk also a little bit about the KPIs and measures. Like, for example, what do you measure in your work? How do you see the progress?
Yeah, well, so we have those overall goals, which are split into like the kind of the longer term, more ambitious goal, which is kind of 2024, and then we have like a midterm goal, which is by the end of this year. So that's quite concrete. Like it defines the inclusivity, which is, it's actually an eNPS score that we get from that people pulse. So we know what's the start value, and then by the end of this, we wanted to halve the gap in terms of those values. And then, well, in terms of the amount of women, like the being the first choice for women, that's like you can measure it through our HR system. That's something that maybe every quarter have a view on that. And then like the leadership team composition, it's more, yeah, it's you kind of like look at the take a view into it in terms of how to because it like there we are not talking about large numbers, we are talking about specific teams. So it's like, how do we, if there's a change, if there's an open position, like what do you do there, and like what are the pipelines into those teams? How do people end up being on the track, like on the leadership track? And it's that's where the actions are focused on. So I think those are on bigger level, the kind of the metrics. And then on I think on a smaller scale, then it's kind of, I have the roadmaps with the specific actions, and each action has then different kind of metrics. So, and I think overall, I would start with like looking at both what makes sense for the company. Where do you want to go? So in our case, we look at the strategy. We know we want to expand internationally. It was very natural to take the multiculturalism as our focus. At the same time, we looked at the minority groups. We looked at where's the gaps, what are the things we need to fix. So those were what told us that kind of where. So I don't think there's a one thing that you can say, but I think it's, yeah, looking, yeah. I think you need to hold that mirror and look back and look forward.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Anna. Now it's closing time. A couple of more words. Within 2 weeks, we have another event that is focusing on introduction to anti-racism at working life. And at June, we are trying to organize an LGBTQ event, which is really interesting. So stay tuned. You have received and feedback for your email, and you will also get the recording this week to your emails. Thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.